If I can read letters about Star Trek Discovery that are positive, even though I don't like it, I like the idea, as I've always said, that the whole point of this place, the whole point of having the Post-Geek Singularity community is for like-minded people that might be on opposite sides of an ideological divide, but we all still love science fiction, fantasy, horror, comics, video games, whatever, in all of its myriad forms. That's our baseline. So we should be able to talk about all of those things with great respect for one another, understanding that we're all lovers of these flights of fancy. So in order to do that, when I get something that I find worth sharing that I might not agree with, but if it's well stated, I appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that somebody actually took the time to write into me knowing I would disagree with them, but they still wrote a very thoughtful letter that was certainly worthy of the Post-Geek Singularity community. And I wanted to read this because I thought it was good. So right off the bat, this one comes from M.E. M.E. Greetings and felicitations, Rob. I hope you're having a splendid day. During your Friday, July 12th live chat, number 171 to be exact, I sent in a super chat regarding my love of Star Trek Discovery. You were very accommodating, as I knew you would be, because despite your loathing of the show, I've come to understand that you're a respectful person overall, and the manner in which you profess your dislike of Discovery, periodically borderline rabid, is anomalous. During your response, you extended an invite for me and others to explain why we love Discovery, as you're interested in perspectives that differ from yours. I was an odd child, a study in contradictions. Many considered me an empty-headed jock, someone overly invested in physical activities. I played multiple sports, such as netball. This is similar to basketball, but players can't run with the ball in hand, and the hoop doesn't have a backboard. Cricket, football, soccer for North Americans, volleyball, and track and field. I even dabbled in tennis. Belying my penchant for team activities, I was intensely quiet and preferred my own company or that of a very limited group of friends. I grew up with many siblings, but rarely spoke to them. One of my older sisters, who I shared a bathroom with, mentioned a few years ago that she could count on one hand how many times my younger self voluntarily spoke to her. I was regarded by family, peers, and teachers as insufferably aloof. I took dance lessons, but spoke to no one in sessions. I sang in the choir, but failed to join in casual conversations. To confound everyone further, I was a peak nerd. I relished learning about anything and everything. I had insatiable curiosity, and when I wasn't perfecting my physical skills, I was burying my head in one of the encyclopedias that my dad kept adding to our collection as a special treat for me. Or I would tuck myself away in school libraries and mentally gorge myself. I would extricate myself from the tangible and merge fully with the abstract. There was nothing that failed to fascinate me. I plunged jubilantly into historical accounts, historical fiction, biographies, autobiographies, myths, legends, fantasies, plays, poetry, scientific tomes, the more hypothetical and speculative the better, contrasting theologies, multiple schools of philosophy, books that focused on earth sciences as well as the social sciences, psychology, art, music. Let's just say, Rob, my mind was ravenous, and what most took to be a slight against them was, in fact, my brain being colossally preoccupied. I was ever caught in the tug between fascinations, and there were rare instances when someone would penetrate the cacophony, a dissonance that kept me separated from others, but which I savored. As you can imagine, very few knew me. I excelled at sports, but I didn't fit with my teammates. I was an acceptable dancer and singer, but no one was surprised by this, as I'm from a family of artists. My father was a singer, producer, songwriter, and political activist. I was mentally nimble enough to be academically advanced, 2 to 3 years ahead of my peers, but due to my isolated nature, only my teachers and professors knew I was intelligent. Once puberty arrived, I took on the stigma of the pretty girl with big tits, and then very little of what I said or did penetrated people's preconceptions. I went from being the person who no one really knew to the girl everyone wrongly assumed they did. I was an athlete who people concluded got my positions and rankings because coaches, judges, umpires, and referees gave me special treatment. And of course, I was only in the honors classes because my father paid my way in, or I was sleeping with my professors. I didn't fit, Rob. I was never enough of any one thing to belong, even in my own psyche. Luckily, our universe saw fit to bring forth into existence a man by the name of Gene Roddenberry. Yes, most scientists would say this is poppycock, but permit me my flight of fancy. I keenly recall as a 4-year-old sitting on the couch in our living room in our house on the island of Jamaica. It was during the fall of 1979, and an episode of the original series opened with a few bars of Alexander Courage's theme song. Something about it reached out to my young mind and latched on to me. I remember a confident yet kind captain, young men who were unsure yet proficient, sparkling lights performing feats of magic, and a man with desperate eyes pleading to be saved from himself. I'd seen Star Wars: A New Hope the previous year. It wasn't A New Hope yet. And where that had left me elated, Star Trek left me transfixed. By the time I heard Captain Kirk first utter the words, "to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before," I had entered into the most loving and faithful relationship of my life. I learned later that my introduction to Star Trek was Dagger of the Mind, and my father said that once the theme song concluded, I got up off the couch and sat down directly in front of the television as close as I could. My siblings complained that I was blocking their view, but I was deaf to them, in a trance of wonderment. I do recall thinking, that's a black woman on a spaceship. She's on a spaceship. I am black and I'm a girl. I can one day travel on a spaceship. And there's a very smart man, but his ears are weird. Wait, he isn't human. One day I can travel in space and meet others like him. What is this? I love it. Where Star Wars had felt fun and exciting, Star Trek was tangible. It breathed. It revealed to me a reality that was not only possible, but probable. The characters were real to me. They had substance. They suffered because their will was usurped. A doctor threw himself into danger for his captain, for his friends. A captain was vulnerable and trusted a female crew member to save him from those who'd raped his mind. A logical man felt horror at the mental chains placed on another. I came to realize over the years that I took to Star Trek as if it were tailor-made for me, because it embodied the many facets of the self I had yet to grow into. I value intelligence as well as hunger for adventure. It's not enough for me to live in constructs, if at all possible. I have to know a thing by doing it. I jumped out of an airplane because I longed to know how it felt to fall through the air from a height of thousands of feet. I throw myself into love when it comes along, because what is a heart that doesn't beat madly for another? I head into the depths of the Amazon rainforest and I live with natives because I need to understand where our species has been to truly reach for what our future could be. I dive deeply into my careers, climbing ladders as necessary because I enjoy challenges. I value courage, counterbalanced by empathy, self-determination by interdependence, and humanitarianism by prudence. And although I don't fit into any one category, I know, because of the core tenets I had identified in Star Trek, that I didn't have to aim to be a by-the-numbers being to be valuable. Nerds didn't have to approve of me, and normies didn't have to accept me. With Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry conveyed a promise to me that in the future, humankind would somehow find its way to be the best version of itself. And once that was achieved, our species would not only journey to planets within our solar system, we would traverse the stars. This achievement, though, would only be possible when we accepted that the best version of our species was one in which differences were not only acknowledged, but considered advantageous. All of us have unique elements to offer, tangible and intangible, for the betterment of humankind. In Saints of Imperfection, Season 2, Episode 5 of Star Trek Discovery, I realized that what I had suspected of Discovery was true. Captain Pike emphatically states, "Starfleet is a promise. I give my life for you, you give your life for me, and nobody gets left behind." And in Through the Valley of Shadows, Season 2, Episode 12, he tells himself, "You're a Starfleet captain. You believe in service, sacrifice, compassion, and love." To Tenavik, he resolutely states, "I'm not going to abandon the things that made me what I am because of a future that contains an ending I hadn't foreseen for myself." Captain Pike is the self-insert for showrunners and writers. Through him, they made a proclamation. They would no longer be leaving anyone behind. They were bringing everyone they could along on Discovery's journey, and those who'd been relegated to enjoying but never fully participating, they now had a welcome berth. They didn't have to choose to be culturally acceptable versions of themselves. They could be quirky and incredibly integral without being the non-human or the inorganic. They could deviate from the norm without subtle insinuations being made that they were abnormal. They could be fearless and emotionally sensitive. They could be acerbic and loved, not just cared for by their shipmates, but beloved by their mates. They could be the primary focus of a narrative without being a captain. They could balance precariously on the knife edge of unscrupulous behavior, yet save the day. I comprehend fully that there are some fans who despise Star Trek Discovery, and they have a multitude of reasons for feeling that they do, as they do. From their supposedly being terrible writing to Star Trek being hijacked, I remember the same being said about The Next Generation. God-awful writing and Deep Space Nine. This isn't Star Trek. I get it. When a thing we love adjusts course, it can be enraging. I will even admit that there have been a few moments of narrative inconsistency, but this is not new for Star Trek, and I won't take anyone seriously who claims otherwise. Still, some find it far too easy to insult those of us who are excited by what's already been provided, as well as the potential of what's to come. I'm tired of the snark, the cowardly inferences slid into discourse that those of us who enjoy Discovery must be half-wits because we enjoy a show that's been dumbed down, as Cal wrote in his letter. I used to be under the false illusion that the Star Trek fandom community aspired to higher ideals. It's become increasingly clear that, as a whole, we don't. It's up to each individual to determine the type of human they're comfortable with being. Rather than listing off the sci-fi properties I prefer, other than Star Trek and Star Wars, I'll just make it clear that I don't suffer fools lightly, neither people nor my entertainment. Hopefully, this provides you some insight into why I and possibly others enjoy Discovery. Here's to us understanding each other, even when we stridently disagree. M.E. Well, as many of you who've watched this channel know, this is not the first time Emmy is written, but it's letters like this and its sentiments as well stated as Emmy states that make this whole thing worthwhile to me. I mean, just sharing this letter is reward enough for what I'm trying to do here at the Burnettwork. And what a wonderful letter, what a wonderful sentiment. I couldn't agree more with what Emmy is saying. I just don't feel for myself that I'm getting that from Star Trek Discovery. But what's very important is that Emmy is, and we can't take that away from her. Now, that's not to say, see, to me, Star Trek Discovery is not a, it's ultimately a Star Trek show. There's many talented people working on every level of it. I understand that. I question a lot of the people's motives beyond making money. I've always hoped, because I'm an idealist, that people work on things that they love. But I'm also very aware that the first two seasons of Star Trek: The Next Generation were a disaster, a revolving writing room. They couldn't really fixate or understand what they were doing until Michael Piller showed up with a vision for the show. And that vision was that he decided, instead of going and dealing with external threats, that all of the stories for Next Generation have to first and foremost begin with one or multiple members of our crew. and that we will move outward from our crew, and that's how we're going to tell stories. And I think Next Generation, even though the third season was a disaster as well, it turned out, luckily, because you did have Michael Piller on board, and there was sort of a unifying theme. And as Ira Steven Behr will tell you, the only season, Deep Space Nine's Ira Behr will tell you, the only season of TNG he worked on was the third season. And it was, as he put it when he arrived, it had already gone into the toilet. But anyway, Emmy's letter, obviously beautifully written, well stated. She's obviously clearly very, very intelligent, keenly intelligent. And I'm actually humbled that she spends any time at all watching me prattle on this channel. But I'm deeply flattered and moved that somebody with obviously her intellect would do so. So that's pretty cool. And I want to thank her once again for writing in. And I think one day we're going to, you know what? I'm going to dedicate, I'm finally going to drop that Diane Duane interview for you, Emmy. Finally, I'm going to drop it. I've had it for a long time. I've been sitting on it for months and months and months, and I'm going to drop it because of all the viewers of this channel, you'll probably appreciate it the most. But anyway, I want to thank you for such a thoughtful letter and a great chat. But I hope that people can see, like, this was just a letter about Star Trek, but let's apply it as fans to anything, whether it's Star Wars, whether it's James Bond, whether it's Doctor Who, whatever your favorite franchise is. Know that even when something happens that you probably cannot stand, or you say that it's tarnished your relationship with whatever it is you loved forever, understand that there are those people that they're coming to these properties for the first time. There are people that Discovery is their very first Star Trek series that they've ever watched. I understand that. And despite sometimes my, dare I say it, toxic attitudes toward the show and people who've been involved in it, I have to remember, you have to be mindful that there are some people that are really enjoying Star Trek Discovery. And it's not fair that we attempt to try and take that enjoyment away from them, or even say that it's wrong, because it's not wrong. If you've never encountered Star Trek before and you're watching Star Trek Discovery, which is modern, if you're somebody that, I mean, you know, I don't want to take away from the fact that what if somebody like Emmy, what if you're an introverted girl who's who or let's say not necessarily introverted, but who has a cacophony of sounds from every direction filling her brain, and her siblings and her teachers and everybody thinks she's aloof, but she's not aloof. Wouldn't you want her to turn out like ME has here? I wouldn't want to ever rob that experience of somebody from somebody by telling them they shouldn't watch, let's face it, a piece of entertainment. I mean, it's not like, you know, it's going to affect global warming necessarily if somebody is watching Star Trek Discovery. And I never want to be the person that takes that enjoyment away from somebody. I never want to be that guy. And hopefully that what we're trying to do here is provide an environment where everyone is welcome, no matter who they are, no matter what they look. There are some people, like, I really don't want neo-Nazis here in my chats. I do have a limit to as tolerant as I'm going to be. Basically, if I don't like anyone who's trying to infringe on the rights of others to be who they are, no matter who they are or what they are. That's sort of where I draw the line. But this is a great letter. I thought it was a great way to kick off Comic-Con week, the biggest fan event of the year. And certainly you've got people of all shapes, sizes, colors, creeds, walks of life, belief systems, religious beliefs, sexualities, genders, whoever they are. The great thing about Comic-Con is everybody can come together in a gigantic stew of imagination and enjoy themselves. And I one of the great things about Comic-Con is, despite the lines, despite the sometimes annoying crowds and things like that, for the most part, Comic-Con is a place where people always have smiles on their faces and are having a good time. And that is because of science fiction, fantasy, and horror, and all of its myriad forms. And we shouldn't forget about that. And we should remember how lucky we are to be part of the Post-Geek Singularity community.